You're listening to the Conversations with KidsPeace podcast. Advice, information, and inspiration from experts at the leading provider of mental and behavioral health services for children, adults, and those who love them. Now, here's your host.
The Conversations with KidsPeace podcast is sponsored by Spyglass Solutions, a nationally recognized management consulting group with comprehensive experience in the challenges of the healthcare field. Learn more at spyglasssolutions.org/conversations.
Hello and welcome to our podcast series, Conversations with KidsPeace. I'm Bob Martin. There's a growing interest in mental health, mental wellness, and the conditions that may emerge as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And recently, I was hearing about a condition that was mentioned in a lot of the news stories about it that really kind of fascinated me. They were calling it imposter syndrome. And to go a little bit deeper into that, we're very pleased to welcome our good friend, Dr. Ashleigh Anderson, the Vice President of Medical Affairs for residential and community-based programs here at KidsPeace. Dr. Anderson, it is always a delight to have you with us. Thank you for coming on board.
And always a delight to be here, Bob.
Oh, excellent, excellent. So let's talk about this. I was saying to you before that, originally I thought when I heard the term imposter syndrome, I thought it was one of those things where an individual is sort of an uncontrolled liar and someone who boosts themselves beyond that. It is not that, and I really want to make that clear. So if you can give us a little bit of a background, what exactly is meant by the term imposter syndrome?
Imposter syndrome, and I actually had to do a little bit of research about this subject myself because I've heard about it. It's been on my radar. But imposter syndrome is defined as the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved.
That's really, I think, interesting because you don't necessarily think of that. Especially because it kind of affects what we would consider to be high-performing or successful people, right?
Yes. So it can affect those people. And when you read about it, most of the literature is regarding those types of people, the high-functioning, high-achieving people, but it really can affect anyone. It mostly, I think it is it disproportionately affects those people that we just mentioned, but it really can't affect anyone.
And we should point out that it is different than someone who might have been raised not to brag about themselves or talk, talk incessantly about their successes and that sort of thing, modesty. It's not that. It is something quite different. And it does have some negative impacts, right, on an individual's mental wellness who might be dealing with it.
Sure. It's definitely different than being humble or modest. And imposter syndrome can lead to symptoms of anxiety and depression and really can affect a person's level of functioning. Whereas if you're just modest or humble, that generally doesn't tend to cause mental health symptoms or affect functioning.
Conversations with KidsPeace is sponsored by Spyglass Solutions at spyglasssolutions.org/conversations. Spyglass offers evidence-based consulting services to help your healthcare organization become more efficient while delivering more positive outcomes for your stakeholders. Spyglass consultants bring hundreds of years of collective experience to bear on the questions you need answered in today's healthcare environment. To find out how they can help you, visit them at spyglasssolutions.org/conversations. That's spyglasssolutions.org/conversations.
And of course, we're hearing today, in the midst of the pandemic, folks who are dealing with anxiety or depressive issues. Those are increased in the circumstances of the pandemic. And I would imagine this folks that might be suffering from this also probably see themselves as maybe unduly affected by the pandemic, and that it just feeds into the whole thing of I'm really not worthy of people praising me for what I'm doing.
Sure. And I think that the pandemic in itself has been a chronic stressor for people. And we often hear about this mental health wave of the pandemic that's coming. And certainly more and more people are showing symptoms of anxiety and depression because of the pandemic. But also people may have been asked to switch their roles during the pandemic, and everybody has had to shift and do jobs outside of their scope of responsibility, which may bring about symptoms of imposter syndrome if you've been asked to do something at a higher level or have been asked to take on more responsibilities with your job.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. If you were, susceptible to this, and your job, your business, your organization needs to get somebody in a new role, they might look at the high performing person and say, "Oh, this is the individual. You can do this." And if that person has those doubts in their mind, it just becomes a cycle. And I thought it was really interesting too, and I did a little bit of research on that. There seemed to have been early on an emphasis in talking about imposter syndrome on women who had had successful careers. I'm wondering why that, and that assumption is being sort of challenged. I'm just wondering why that was the initial assumption, and why what is the current thinking in terms of who is susceptible to this?
The current thinking is that both men and women are susceptible to this, but I would venture to guess that probably it affects more women. Also, interestingly enough, medical professionals have a high incidence of this because as you go through and specifically doctors, to get into medical school from the get-go, it's a very rigorous process. So you're constantly surrounded by high achieving people. And so this makes you particularly vulnerable to this because everybody's doing well, everybody's achieving seemingly, it seems as if nobody is failing. And so I think it affects this population for that reason, because you're constantly around this population of high achieving individuals.
Yeah, and it's it's almost like a confirmation of those doubts that if you're in that situation, I am as not worthy as I think I am because look at everybody
everybody else.
Yeah.
Yes. And
what can people do if they feel that their lives are being impacted, their happiness is being affected? What can they do about this?
Seek help, seek support with this or any other mental health condition that you think is concerning and outside of your baseline. Certainly seek help. You can start with family, friends, and your internal support network. But also, I think if that isn't working or you need additional support, seek help outside of that to a mental health professional.
It sounds like one of those things that is a little bit hidden, but it's one of those things that really is made worse by the stigma of mental wellness treatment. And if you feel like you are in this sort of situation, and as I said, your life, your happiness is affected by it, please do seek help. Dr. Anderson, you've been through the drill. Well, you know that we ask each of our guests for a life hack. So what's your life hack today?
Do I have one for you, Bob?
Oh.
Did you know that if you put pancake mix into an empty ketchup, mustard, choose the condiment that you want, if you put it into a container like that, it's a no mess way to make pancakes, waffles, any of your favorite breakfast foods?
That's fantastic. I have to admit I'm kind of obsessive about waffles, but it is a monumental mess, and a lot of it is getting everything mixed and trying to get the stuff into the waffle iron, and how much of it doesn't go into the waffle iron, but goes on the counter, and of course, we're all hearing about the ketchup shortage. So maybe we have a surplus of empty bottles, and you can put them to use. That's a great life hack. Thank you.
And especially if you have kids, it's a no mess way for them to help.
Absolutely. Oh, that's
you can do shapes. You can do letters.
You can draw. You can, that's fantastic.
You can teach them to cook. You can teach them the alphabet, Bob. This, I think, is probably your.
And you know what? I'm going to try that myself. I don't want to make it sound like I want to be a lifelong learner, so I'm going to learn the alphabet with pancakes. Dr. Ashleigh Anderson is Vice President of Medical Affairs for residential and community-based programs here at KidsPeace. Dr. Anderson, even more of a delight that time. Thank you so much for being with us.
And same to you, Bob. Thanks.
And thank you all for joining us as well. We look forward to having you join us again for more conversations with KidsPeace. Take care.